Hello world, I'm Jack, and this is problem X from the CS50X coding contest. So in this problem, students were tasked with drawing a box out of stars and drawing an X in the middle of the box. And so I'm going to go through how to do that. And so the first thing we need to do is, if we look at the problem itself, the input was restricted to be between 3 and 23. And the input also had to be odd so that the X would be evenly shaped inside the box. And so I'm going to just run a quick example here. And as you can see, we have this nice thing. I put in 23, so it's 23 rows tall with an X in the middle. And so I'm going to now go through how you go about this. And so the first thing we want to do is we want to print the top row. And so the top row is going to be just the input is called n, so the input number of stars along the top. And so that's the first thing. In the second half, then we're going to print the top half. And we want to do the top half and the bottom half separately, as you'll see in a bit. And so if we look at the X again here, the top half, each row is comprised of essentially the same kind of thing. There's a space at the beginning, there's a space at the end, or there's a star at the beginning and a star at the end. And there's a certain number of spaces in between the beginning star and the next star, and that's the same between the second star in the X and the end star. And there's a certain amount of space in the middle. And so much like Mario with CS50X itself, we need to figure out a way to print the correct number of spaces, then a star, then the next correct number of spaces, then another star, and then the correct number of spaces again. And so the first thing we need to do is we're going to create a variable. We're going to obviously use a for loop for this to iterate row by row. And we're going to create a variable, and I've called it side spaces here. And that means that that's the number of spaces on the side of the X. So between the side of the box and the first part of the X. And in the top half, the formula for that is going to be whatever row we're in minus 1. So if we're in the second row, it's going to be 0 spaces. If we're in the third row, it's going to be 1 space. And so when I print each row, I'm going to first print a star, and then I'm going to print side spaces, the variable that I've just defined, number of spaces afterwards. Then I'm going to print another star, and so that's this star here, this first set of stars in the X. And now I need to print a number of spaces in the middle. And so I know that the box is n characters wide. I know there are 4 stars that take up space, and I know that I have 2 times the number of side spaces, other spaces, and whatever's left is going to be the number of spaces in the middle of the X. And so, for example, if we're looking at this row, right, I have my 4 stars, I have my 2 sets of side spaces, and then what's left in the middle here. And so I'm going to print that number of spaces, going to print another star, and then I'm going to print the side spaces one more time here. And so all of that in code, this is the code for printing the top half. Right, we're going to define side spaces, print the first star, print side spaces, number of side spaces, print another star, print however many spaces there are in the middle, which is going to depend completely on the number of spaces there are on the side, print another star, print the number of side spaces again, then print our last star, and that's the last row on the side of the box with an n-line character. So after we've printed the top half, we need to print the middle row. And the middle row is just a space, and then some number of spaces, 1 star, another number of spaces, and another star. And so the formula for the number of spaces is n minus 3 divided by 2. So we're going to print the star. We're going to print n minus 3 over 2 spaces. Then we're going to print another star, print the same number of spaces again, and then we're going to print another star and an n line. So at this point in the code, we've printed this much of the X shape in the star. So now we have to print the bottom half. And just like the top half, we're going to use the same kind of side spaces nomenclature here. Note again in the for loop that it's n over 2 because we're only printing half of the box. And so this time the formula for the side spaces is going to be a little bit different because the number of side spaces is decreasing instead of increasing as we go down. So the formula is going to be n divided by 2 minus I minus 1. And then the code looks pretty much identical to what it was during the top half, right? We are printing our star, we're printing side spaces, number of spaces, we're printing our star, we're printing the amount of spaces in the middle, which is again, the width of the box minus the 4 stars, minus the 2 sets of spaces on the side. Then we're printing one more star, then we're printing the spaces again on the side, and then we're printing the star and the endline character. And so then after that, the last thing we have to print is the bottom row, which we print exactly the same as the top row, and number of stars in a row. And so one thing that a lot of people might have missed in the coding contest was if the input was not proper, if the input was less than 3, greater than 23, or even, because we needed to be odd so we can print out even x, you were supposed to print nothing. And so that's why we have this return -1 right up at the top. I'm Jack, and this was X.